Good evening. Hi, I'm Christa Wessel, the evening host at All Classical Portland, which is a preset on all of your radios, right? 89.9. Yes, I see some thumbs up. Excellent. Good. I broke my ankle a couple of months ago, and I'm still recovering, thus the cane. I know. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I'm so thrilled to be joined in these pre-concert conversations today by composer Andy Akiho and conductor David Danzmayr.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm looking at this program, and I just can't believe how excited I am. It's so colorful. It's so energetic. It's so exciting. There's a world premiere commission. There's some crazy music by Charles Ives. The Firebird by Stravinsky is just going to be exciting from top to bottom. But I know that when you came in and sat down, you saw all this stuff up here, right? This whole array of percussion. That is Andy Akiho's doing. He wrote the Percussion Concerto that calls for all this stuff. So, I don't even know where to begin. So you wrote this for our soloist, Colin Currie.
Yes.
And do you write it knowing what his skills are, just how virtuosic? Are you trying to push him as hard as you can? What's the motivating factor in like writing this music? Are you trying to make him angry at you?
No, it's all good vibes, you know. I've been inspired by Colin for years, and I got to hear him back in 2011 at the Aspen Music Festival, and then in 2012 at LA Philharmonic. And we hung out and we got to know each other's music and his performing my compositions a little bit, so we always talked about doing something down the line. And it was cool that it, you know, came to fruition here especially.
And so when you get the commission to write a percussion concerto, I mean, have you written anything of this scope before, where you kind of have free rein to pull in as many percussion instruments as you like?
Not quite like this, not with a world-class soloist like this, but I did get the opportunity to write. I mean, I wrote a triple concerto for violin, percussion, and ping pong. So, we were limited. I couldn't do all this for the percussionist because this was David Costin. I couldn't do all that because we had a Olympic-sized ping pong table on stage too. So it was this kind of scope, but completely different beast. So this is the first time for something like this for sure.
I was watching the ping pong concerto on YouTube just backstage with some of the stagehands, and we were just like, who is this guy? What does he think he's doing? So today, no ping pong table, but I've got a list of instruments you employ for the soloist. In the first movement, 13 chromatic ceramic bowls, right here behind this music stand. And they're ceramic bowls of different thicknesses, it looks like, and depths, and from what I understand, you went to great lengths to find the exact right ceramic bowls.
Yes, I mean, we just found an extra set a couple of hours ago. Yeah, actually, but I found these in Chinatown in New York. I'm back and forth between there and here. And there's a lot of shops where you can find ceramic rice bowls. It's not too bad, but you have to go through hundreds or thousands sometimes to get all the right pitches, so they're in tune with the orchestra, because you can have an infinite number of A's or G sharps, but to have one that's right in tune with the equal temperament tuning system, you have to go through a lot. And I use a tuner on the iPhone and kind of get it within 2 or 3 cents.
So what do you do? Just going into second-hand shops and banging on the stuff on the shelves, or what?
A lot of restaurant supply shops, because they'll have mini bowls, and yeah, like Hong Kong supermarkets, Japanese stores, like a lot of stores that sell rice bowls. And sometimes the managers don't mind, sometimes they do. Yeah.
Conductor David Danzmayr, when you saw the score and you saw the first movement calling for 13 ceramic bowls, what was your reaction?
Well, actually, then later I found out that he got them in shops. I thought, like, when I saw ceramic bowls, that's kind of like a thing of his, and I thought, like, maybe he has a shop that made the ceramic bowls,
Just
like for him also. So I didn't realize only when I met Andy, and I asked him like on the side, like, hey, by the way, where do you get the ceramic bowls from, right? He told me, well, I went to the shops and I asked the shopkeeper, can I kind of like try and with the tuner, and I was like, oh, so that's actually real bowls. That's not like custom made ones. You actually went through the shops and kind of like tried them all out. I had no idea. It didn't occur to me when I looked at the score, right?
And so are the 13 ceramic bowls a chromatic scale?
Yeah, so it's from C to C, just one octave plus the octave, so really 12 pitches. Yeah.
Okay, I feel like such a newbie, like a noob, talking about the weird instruments around stage, but I'm not a percussionist, so all of this is just kind of, it's tickling to me. So in the second movement, marimba, we know what the marimba is, and large rubber band.
Oh, that was before I finished the piece.
Okay.
And I actually didn't use the rubber band. Yeah, I do that a lot, with rubber band on the marimba, but I ended up going a more lyrical direction in the marimba part for this. I kind of went out of my comfort zone a little bit to do that. I actually treated a marimba like a marimba. And I've never done that in the past. I've always made it something else, kind of, and there's always been a big rubber band at the bottom, but yeah, I took it a different direction. So there's no big rubber band tonight. Okay. Sorry about that.
X that out. The third movement, you employ vibraphone, yeah?
Oh man, this is so different.
Old? Okay.
Yeah, okay, the program notes are, yeah, this is a brand new piece, so things change. So there's the third movement, if you're reading the program, just scratch that. So it's really, the interlude's really the third movement, and that's the toy piano that's actually backstage right now. Toy piano and a glass bottle. And that's a duet between Sarah and a concertmaster, violin, and Colin.
And is the glass bottle very specifically tuned as well?
No, that one's not.
Just a random glass bottle.
It just has to sound good.
Okay.
Yeah. San Pellegrino.
And then, is the fourth movement right? Brake drum? Yeah, that's like from a car part, a brake drum?
Yeah, that's almost as common as a snare drum now. Actually.
Really?
I mean, in a lot of contemporary classical music and even orchestral scores, and I came to using brake drum through two different avenues. The first is through steel pan music in Trinidad. They have what they call the engine room, and that's kind of like the heartbeat of the steel orchestra. And there's always somebody playing brake drums, and it's like this driving rhythm the entire time through the calypsos and stuff. So brake drums are used there, and then I started, when I got into classical music, I heard composers like David Lang and Michael Gordon, Julia Wolf use brake drums and stuff.
So any self-respecting percussionist today has a brake drum in their studio?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning things as we go.
No, it's yeah, but if they're playing more contemporary music, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever conducted anything like this?
I did actually with Colin a couple of percussion concertos. Nothing quite like Andy's, and I will be honest. I actually like Andy's more than most percussion concertos that I've done, because I think it's a brilliant piece, incredibly inventive. I've never done a concerto with the bowls, and actually, to be honest, in the first rehearsal, when I was, I'm standing a little bit further back for the piece than what is set up now. I said to Colin, is there any chance that we move that further away, because there is something about the sound of the bowls. I'm very close with my ears. In the hall you will get amplification because they're not that loud, but they're pretty close to my right ear. And in the first rehearsal there was something about one or two of the bowls that really irritated me. And I said to Colin, I was like, Colin, I don't know, can we do something? But I got used to it, so it's fine. It's absolutely fine. It was just in the first rehearsal there was something. I was like, what is this? That's great.
Well, because none of us have ever heard this piece before, can you, Andy, kind of walk us through what the flow of the piece is, maybe what your inspiration for some of this music is, what to listen for?
Yeah, definitely. There's no kind of narrative. It's not like you're gonna hear this and that's gonna be the unicorn or anything. There's nothing like that. I joke around and I'll say, yeah, this is the unicorn section or something, but for real, there's no kind of narrative to follow like that. But musically, I was really inspired by the city And I'm not just saying that, I really wrote the piece here. And I kind of moved here as I was writing it, too. So anything from going to Q Coffee, to Sisters, to Quova, to Cacao, any of these places, like everywhere I'm writing, kind of just affected what I do. And it's very abstract music. There's no story. That's why it's just simply titled Percussion Concerto. I hope that's what's printed. Yeah. I might have messed that up too, but you know, these things have to be turned in sometimes before the piece is even done. So, things to listen for is pretty straightforward. Actually, it's not too wacky with instrumentation. A lot of it's pretty straightforward, except the bowls, but. You know, guys like Lou Harrison, John Cage, a lot of late 20th century or mid 20th century composers were using the bowls. I just use it with the vocabulary I work with. So it might feel like a new thing, you know, with my vocabulary, with what Colin's doing, but it's nothing new in percussion literature, you know. Anything from using ceramic bowls to clay pots for, you know, planting and stuff. But I feel like you'll really hear my voice in this piece. I've never put so much into a piece like this. And so you know, the first movement will be the bowls for like 10 minutes. The second movement will be marimba. And like I said, I went new directions with that for writing for the marimba, and it's very contrapuntal with the strings. There's a lot of Baroque kind of counterpoint, and a little. I mean, if you care about that stuff, I noticed it after, not while I'm doing it. I'm not gonna go, okay, I'm gonna be like Bach here, but I'm influenced by them. I can't do it to their level, so you know, just being inspired by these composers helps sculpt that. And then the third movement, or the interlude, it's really just called an interlude. The toy piano and Sarah, it's more intimate, but still kind of quirky. Very much my vocabulary. And then the last movement is a combination of the vibraphone and this Glock pod. And this Glock pod is kind of like a drum set.
Glock pod?
So
Glockenspiel?
Yeah, so like the Glockenspiel, the bells up here, and the break drum that we talked about earlier, the snare drum, and the kick drum, or the bass drum, like a drum kit. So it's very idiomatic, as if you were, from a percussion perspective, as if you were playing a drum kit. So instead of playing like the ride cymbal or the hi-hat, you're playing a Glockenspiel melody. So you can listen for that, and you can see it in his right hand. His left hand would be on the snare drum or the break drum, and his right foot would be on the kick drum down here.
So we're going to watch Colin Currie kind of migrate across the stage throughout the course of the percussion.
Yeah, and
he's not bouncing back and forth. He just kind of...
Pretty much, yeah. It's each movement, he's kind of in his own pod or area. And then there's a lot of conversation with the orchestra this piece. I tried to do that and learn from that and orchestrate it in the way I would a chamber piece. The intimacy you can get with a chamber group, I tried to really do that and challenge myself to do that on a larger scale with the full orchestra.
So Maestro Andy has said a couple of times, this is my vocabulary. I wrote this with my vocabulary. What would you say is Andy, I'm not going to put him on the spot to describe, what would you say is his vocabulary of sound? What do you hear when you hear this music?
You know what really struck me immediately, and that was upon learning the score already before even the rehearsal started, is like when you think about percussion concertos, and like I said, I've done a couple of them, what sometimes frustrated is maybe a too strong word, but I sometimes noticed, and not necessarily in a positive way with other percussion concertos, is that they use a lot of percussive instruments for the soloist, but ones that don't necessarily make a tune. You know, kind of like hitting, and then the orchestra is used to provide the tune, to provide the melody, you know, and you have often that going on at the same time. And what I really love about Andy's piece is, you know, the percussionist feels really like a soloist in a way, like, you know, a pianist would be, or kind of like, you know, a melodic instrument would be, even in the first movement with the bowls. You know, there is real melody right there with the soloist. And so it feels for me much more like a real like a real solo part that I'm accompanying in the best way. You know, it kind of feels really like a concerto, and that's really not easy to do. I think that's something that's quite unique about this concerto, that you really have the feeling there's a soloist part, and then there's an orchestra part, and the way it fits together is like really a kind of like partnership, and not like, you know, the orchestra providing the melody for, you know, the percussion instruments that don't have a melody.
I've been thinking a lot as I've been listening to the music on this program. Clearly, I haven't heard your percussion concerto bugle corps for a while. And I'm wondering in the percussion parts whether there's like a lot of regimented, you know, snare drum stuff, or whether it's really kind of soaring lyrical lines, or kind of a combination of both.
I think there's a combination of both. I mean, the drumline thing is from my roots from when I was in high school and just starting college. So you know, that's how I got into music a lot too, was going in the woods and playing snare drum for hours, and then, you know, doing the drum corps thing. It's funny, I never really talk about it, but it is part of my background. I often forget that, but it was great. But the main thing I learned from that is like perseverance and working really hard. Most people that come out of there, they're not necessarily musicians, but they apply that to whatever they do in life. So really that energy's in it, but it's a combination of everything. I mean, any composer can say that too. It's a combination of all your life experiences, everything. So, you know, when I was in high school, I was obsessed with drumline, and then when I was in college, I was obsessed with jazz, and then I moved to New York and played jazz and tried to do that. Then I was really obsessed with Trinidadian calypso and soca. So there's that, and anything from hip hop to jazz to rock, everything's in there. And I don't try to do it. I don't try to go, okay, this is going to be the jazz section, this is going to be the calypso section. It's just all in there, and the composite is what it is. So I don't think about it. It's just intuitive. But
Can you hear this? You're nodding, David Danzmayr.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking one of the sections of his piece, I always feel like, you know, being in a nightclub in the best way. I mean, it's just like really, reminds me of the times when I went out with friends. So it's really kind of in some ways it's very comforting for me and very exciting at the same time. But it's like he said, it's completely naturally in there. It's just a section that feels for me like that. Maybe he didn't even see it that way, but it's just like, you know, it goes through the different sections in such a natural way that it never feels like, oh, okay, yeah, now he kind of like wants to point this out. So it's just a very natural flow.
I'm so excited. Go ahead.
Oh, just for me, the reason I do that is it just feels the most honest way to present my life experiences in music instead of speaking. Like, you know, I feel like I could tell the story better through that, and then working with, you know, it's been great working with the Symphony, working with Colin, like just and David. It's just been like awesome when everybody can bring this all together and kind of just make a composite experience. Because it's not just about my life experiences too. Like the way, for example, Colin grew up and what he brings to it is going to be his personality. All the music that's influenced him, all his life experiences outside of music, you know, everybody. So and that's what's been cool about meeting, you know, this is the first time we got to work together. This is actually the first time me and Colin have really worked together. You know, we've known about each other, but being able to do that and experience this, it makes it a true collaboration. And then me being in the city so much and meeting all the musicians here, so I'm thinking literally specific musicians. If I'm writing a woodwind part or the percussion parts, I know them really well now. Or, you know, Kevin right there, cello, you know, like everybody, you know, that really affects the music, you know.
Very personal event for you tonight, the premiere.
Most definitely.
Yeah, how wonderful. I want to take that thread, since we only have about 10 minutes left, about the marching band, and dive into the Charles Ives, because there is some marching band madness in the second movement of this piece by Charles Ives. Where should we start with this, David Danzmayr?
Well, I think for me the fascinating thing about Ives is like how old this music is. You know, I mean, it's pretty much 100 years old, and it sounds like it could have been written yesterday in some ways. I think Ives was incredibly unique, and for me, one of the most influential and incredible American composers, you know, there ever was. I love Ives' music. I understand when some people say they are not so into it, but like the basic idea, particularly of the second movement, is basically this. When you have, for example, a couple of marching bands coming together, let's say for a festival or so, it's not quite the story that's behind it, but like from the concept that he composes is that a lot of things happen at the same time, and you could imagine that you kind of like, there is a rehearsal of different bands or different units going on at the same time, but he lets it just speak for itself at the same time. He doesn't try to mold it into one, or he doesn't try to fit it together. He just like, you have in the orchestra sometimes 4 or 5 different groups playing completely unrelated stuff, and I like that. It's something that appeals to me massively, to just let each voice be their own and have them kind of clash together and see what's coming out. Also, it's masterfully crafted in the way he wrote it.
I was reading about Charles Ives and his life, and his dad was the leader of a band, some kind of marching military band, right? And oftentimes little baby Charles Ives would witness several marching bands rehearsing simultaneously, and so that second movement is kind of an embodiment of that.
I think it's like what Andy says. I mean, as a composer, or as a real composer, you work with what you have and your life experiences and what influences you, and I think with Charles Ives that's very clear. It's also the way that he writes scores, because he was an insurance mathematician, and the way that he writes the scores, I mean, it's very clear that it's written by a person who loves math. It's just incredible. And there is a new edition. It's a little bit easy to read, but I remember the first time I learned Three Places in New England is many, many, many years ago. And I had to learn from the original score, from his original edition, and it was just insane. I loved it because I love math, but like I remember sitting for days and trying to figure out where the different notes actually fit in the bar. But it makes absolute sense. It's not crazy writing. It's just crazy writing from a musician's perspective.
Right. It just seems cacophonous in the best possible way. There's an order to it, but you just have to kind of split your brain in half.
I think what Ives realized is that for real beauty to emerge, it's really good to have a counterpoint, okay? And I think that's really what is the strongest in his piece, that when you have the second movement and it gets more crazy, and at the end of the second movement, there are so many things happening at the same time, and some of them, deliberately chaotic, that it sounds like you said, it sounds like an absolute cacophony, and the whole thing stops, and comes the third movement that is based on some of the most beautiful melodies and an incredibly emotional, very peaceful, very quiet piece. But again, this first half of the last movement, the calm, beautiful, simple one, is then set into contrast again with how it ends and how it kind of ramps up and goes crazy again. And I think that sometimes we forget when we think about things that we perceive as ugly. I mean, we label things so quickly, right? As ugly, beautiful or so. And I think in Ives' way, the great thing about his compositions is that he puts these things into contrast, and it makes both sides better for it, I think.
I think so too. And I love how if you're listening even with half an ear, you'll catch these little phrases of spirituals or American Civil War songs, but never a full phrase.
It's always parts. There's even a very, very small part of the American anthem at the end of the second movement. And so my teacher in Salzburg, who is an American conductor, Dennis Russell Davis, he said, when you do this piece in the United States, you can have guess the melody game, because people know many of these melodies. Of course, like when we performed it in Austria, kind of like people realize there are melodies, but nobody had any idea what they are, right? But yeah, I think here people recognize some of the melodies. Yeah.
I've been watching on YouTube live performances of this piece by Charles Ives, Three Places in New England, and I hear audiences chuckle throughout. When they catch hold of one of the phrases of a tune that and then it disappears, there's chuckling, and especially after the dual marching band thing in the second movement. That just ends very suddenly, and nobody knows what to do but laugh. And then you're rewarded with this gorgeous third movement, which is a depiction. Charles Ives and his wife got married, and then a few months later went for this beautiful walk in western Massachusetts along the river, and you can hear everything.
Yeah, it's very clearly there. And again, we speak about how life experiences influence great art, and how that transcends time and can be heard today when you do a performance of it. When you listen to the third movement, there is, in the music, there is this moment of him and his wife walking along the river and having a real beautiful moment in their life. And he manages, and that's, I think, the sign of a great composer, he manages this emotional content. And, you know, nowadays, you know, so long after it was written, we can perform it, but the emotional content is still there. I mean, for me, that's always what I speak about the magic of music. Is, you know, people is like, you know, where is the magic nowadays? But music is pure magic in that way, because there is no real scientific explanation how that works. That, you know, a composer feels something 100 years later, we can evoke the same emotion that the composer put on the page by performing the piece. It's just like, you know, really an incredible experience for me.
This Ives, the more I listen to it, the more I love it. It's a mix of nostalgia and humor and just a mathematic brain. It's brilliant. And I love that it's on the same half of the program as your percussion concerto. And we didn't even talk about the Firebird. My gosh, in a sentence before we have to go. What would you say?
There's not so much to say. Firebird is one of my favorite pieces ever. It was my favorite piece, bar none, when I was a kid. I listened to it more than I can ever. I mean, I literally, when I was a kid, I listened to it every day of my life. I've memorized the piece far before I was actually a conductor. And yeah, it's just, for me, it's just like one of the big masterworks of music. And again, you know, a composer who manages to really bring real emotion and the pictures of the story of Firebird to really, you know, express it in the music, not in a technical way, not in a kind of like just sophisticated writing way, but to just manage to completely put, like, you know, the emotions of the story on the musical page. It's just a masterwork.
This program from top to bottom is innovative and colorful and exciting, and I'm so glad you were here early to learn all about it. I'm Christa Wessel, composer Andy Akiho, and conductor David Danzmayr.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.